Have you ever woken up with a small, itchy bump on your arm and wondered what happened while you were asleep? At first, it seems insignificant, just a tiny red mark, a little itching, nothing to worry about. But that small bump is actually the evidence of a surprisingly sophisticated biological attack. Because when most people think about a mosquito, they imagine a simple insect landing on the skin and drinking blood. The reality is far stranger. Some creatures leave clusters of bites, others cause intense pain, some can even affect your entire nervous system. But it all begins with the most common mark of all, a single itchy bump, and behind it is a microscopic surgical operation. What most people don't realize is that a mosquito does not use a single needle to bite you. In fact, it uses a complex set of tools so advanced that scientists spent years studying exactly how it works. When a female mosquito lands on your skin, she doesn't start feeding immediately. First, she searches for the perfect spot. She detects the carbon dioxide you exhale every time you breathe. She senses your body heat. She can even identify certain chemicals released through your sweat. It's almost as if she's following an invisible map leading directly to you. And yes, we said female, because male mosquitoes do not drink blood. They survive mainly on nectar and plant sugars. The females, however, need the proteins found in blood to develop their eggs. That's why they are responsible for the bites that millions of people suffer every night. Once she finds the right location, the real operation begins. What appears to be a single needle is actually a structure made of several specialized parts. Two tiny tools slice through the skin, two others pull the tissue apart, another acts as a feeding tube, and one more injects saliva into the body. All of this happens within seconds, while you continue sleeping peacefully. But here's where things get really interesting. The bite itself is not what causes the itch. Your own immune system actually creates the itching. Mosquito saliva contains anticoagulants that prevent your blood from clotting while the insect feeds. Without them, the blood flow would quickly stop. The problem is that your body recognizes those chemicals as foreign invaders. In response, it releases histamine, and that histamine is what causes the redness, swelling, and the almost irresistible urge to scratch. In other words, the bump you see is not the mosquito's attack, it's your body's defense response. And surprisingly, not everyone reacts the same way. Some people barely notice mosquito bites at all. Others develop large swollen welts that can last for days. It all depends on how their immune system responds to the mosquito's saliva. But now imagine waking up and finding not one bite, not two, but 3, 4, or even 5 marks arranged in a perfectly straight line across your skin. Because when the bites form a pattern, the culprit is usually something very different. And what it does while you sleep is even more unsettling. Because while a mosquito arrives, feeds, and disappears within seconds, this intruder can spend a large part of the night walking across your body. We're talking about bed bugs. For centuries, they have lived alongside humans, hiding inside mattresses, bed frames, furniture cracks, and even behind pictures and electrical outlets. And despite their small size, their feeding strategy is remarkably efficient. The first thing you should know is that bed bugs do not fly. They do not jump, they simply wait. They remain hidden during the day and emerge mostly at night when they detect body heat and the carbon dioxide we exhale while breathing. Once they find a target, the search for blood begins. And this is where one of the most famous bite patterns in the world appears. What many experts call a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, a sequence of several bites arranged in a line. Why does this happen? Because a bedbug rarely finds the perfect feeding spot on its first attempt. It feeds for a moment, moves a few centimeters, pierces the skin again, and repeats the process several times until it finds the ideal blood flow. The result is a trail of red marks that can look as if they were drawn with a ruler. But that's not even the most impressive part. Before feeding, the bedbug injects a chemical cocktail designed to go unnoticed. Its saliva contains anticoagulants that keep the blood flowing, but it also contains anesthetic compounds. In other words, it's biting you while actively trying to prevent you from feeling it. That's why many people don't realize they've been bitten until several hours later. In severe infestations, some individuals can receive dozens of bites in a single night without ever waking up. And while you sleep peacefully, the bedbugs continue feeding in the darkness. What's even more fascinating is that reactions vary dramatically from person to person. Some people develop large, obvious welts. Others show only minor signs. Some individuals barely react at all, which means an infestation can remain unnoticed for weeks. But now imagine the bites are no longer appearing on your back, not on your arms, not near your bed. Instead, they're concentrated around your ankles and lower legs. And that usually means the attacker isn't coming from the mattress, it's coming from the floor. From the carpet, from cracks in the floor, or from wherever your pet likes to sleep. We're talking about fleas. And despite their tiny size, they possess some of the most impressive physical abilities in the animal kingdom. At first glance, they seem insignificant, just tiny dark specks barely visible to the human eye. But their hind legs function like biological catapults. A flea can jump more than 100 times its own body length. To put that into perspective, if humans had the same ability, we could leap over a multi-story building in a single jump. And that extraordinary skill serves one very specific purpose: finding blood. Fleas remain close to the ground, waiting for the right opportunity. They detect vibrations, they sense body heat, and when a potential host passes nearby, they launch themselves with a jump so fast it's almost impossible to see. Within a fraction of a second, they're already on the skin. That's why flea bites are usually concentrated around the ankles and lower legs. They're simply the first part of the body the flea reaches after jumping. Once there, it pierces the skin and begins feeding. But the real problem isn't always the bite itself, it's the reaction it causes. Flea saliva contains proteins capable of triggering an allergic response that can be far more intense than many mosquito bites. In some people, a single bite can cause significant swelling. In others, clusters of extremely itchy bumps may remain irritated for days. And the more a person scratches, the worse the situation can become. Open wounds make it easier for bacteria to enter and increase inflammation. But here's something even more surprising. Fleas don't always live on animals. In fact, much of their life cycle takes place away from their hosts. Their eggs can fall into carpets, furniture, pet bedding, or cracks in the floor. And while adult fleas search for blood, an entirely new generation may be developing silently inside your home. That's why some people treat their pets and still continue receiving bites for weeks afterward. The problem is no longer on the animal, it's hidden in the environment. Yet as frustrating as flea bites can be, we're still talking about a relatively common annoyance, because there comes a point when everything changes. Now we're entering a completely different territory, because here, the first thing you feel is pain, and not just any pain. We're talking about a sensation so sudden and intense that many people describe it as having a red-hot needle driven directly into their skin. Welcome to the world of fire ants. At first glance, they look like ordinary ants. Small, fast, easy to ignore, but they possess one of the most effective chemical weapons in the animal kingdom. When a fire ant feels threatened, it first grabs the skin with its mandibles. Then it pivots its body in a circle while injecting venom repeatedly. That's why a single ant can leave multiple painful stings within seconds. And the chemical largely responsible for that burning sensation has a name: piperidine, a group of highly irritating alkaloids that make up most of the ant's venom, unlike mosquitoes or fleas, whose primary effect comes from triggering an immune response. Fire ant venom directly damages nearby tissue. That's why the initial sensation is often described as burning, literally, which is exactly how the insect earned its name. And the pain is only the beginning. Hours later, small white blisters or pustules often appear. These lesions are so characteristic that many doctors can suspect a fire ant sting simply by looking at them. But here's something even more remarkable. A single colony can contain hundreds of thousands of ants. And when the nest is disturbed, they respond as a coordinated army. Within seconds, dozens or even hundreds can swarm onto a person at the same time. That's why some victims receive dozens of stings simultaneously, each one delivering its own dose of venom. And as frightening as that sounds, we're still not talking about the most famous stinger on Earth, because there is another insect whose weapon continues working even after its owner has died, and you've probably known it your entire life: the honeybee. Unlike fire ants, which can sting multiple times, honeybees use a completely different strategy. Their stinger is covered with tiny backward-facing barbs, almost like a microscopic fish hook. When it penetrates the skin of a mammal, those barbs become lodged in the tissue. And that's when something extraordinary happens. As the bee tries to fly away, the stinger doesn't come out. It remains embedded. In fact, the bee leaves behind part of its digestive tract, muscles, and venom sac, a fatal injury for the insect. But the attack isn't over yet, because the stinger has a kind of biological autopilot. Even after becoming detached from the bee's body, it continues moving. The muscles keep contracting, and the venom sac sac keeps pumping toxins into the wound. In other words, the stinger continues working even after the bee is gone. That's why experts recommend removing it as quickly as possible. Every extra second allows more venom to enter the body. One of the most important components of that venom is melittin, a molecule capable of puncturing and damaging cell membranes. It is one of the primary causes of the pain, swelling, and burning sensation that follows a bee sting. But melittin doesn't work alone. The venom contains a complex mixture of compounds designed to amplify the body's response. The result is a rapidly inflamed, reddened area that becomes extremely sensitive. For most people, the pain eventually fades. But for others, the real danger isn't the venom itself, it's the immune system. Some individuals develop a severe allergic reaction known as anaphylaxis, a medical emergency capable of causing breathing difficulties, a dangerous drop in blood pressure, and even loss of consciousness within minutes. Yet as impressive as the bee's weapon may be, another insect solved one of its greatest limitations, the wasp. At first glance, a wasp may look similar to a bee, but its weapon works in a completely different way. Its stinger is smooth. Unlike a bee's stinger, it has no backward-facing barbs that become trapped in the skin. That means a wasp can sting, pull out its stinger, and attack again and again. As a result, a single wasp can deliver multiple stings within just a few seconds. But the problem isn't only the number of stings, it's also the venom. Wasp venom contains a mixture of compounds designed to trigger immediate pain, inflammation, and a strong immune response. The sensation is often described as an intense burning pain combined with a sharp, stabbing pressure that appears instantly. Unlike mosquito or flea bites, there is no delay before the effects begin. The pain starts the moment the sting occurs. Some species of wasps also release alarm chemicals when they feel threatened. These signals can attract nearby wasps, turning a single sting into a coordinated attack. That's why accidentally disturbing a nest can result in dozens of stings within seconds. However, as painful as a wasp sting can be, the effects usually remain localized around the wound. But there is another creature whose venom does something far more disturbing. A creature capable of turning a small bite into a darkening wound that can destroy tissue and literally kill skin from the inside out. The brown recluse spider. Up until now, the damage appeared almost immediately. Itching, burning, swelling. But the next creature plays a much slower game, and a far more unsettling one, because when a brown recluse spider bites, many people don't even realize it. The bite often feels like a small pinprick, or in some cases, nothing at all. That's why the real danger begins hours later. At first, a small red area appears, nothing alarming, but little by little, the wound begins to change. The center may become darker, taking on a purple or black appearance. And that's when doctors start to become concerned. The venom of the brown recluse contains enzymes capable of damaging blood vessels and destroying tissue around the bite site. Unlike the venom of a bee or a wasp, whose primary effect is pain and inflammation, this venom can kill skin cells and the tissue beneath them. That's why some wounds continue to grow over the following days. The most frightening part is that the damage continues even after the spider is long gone. What starts as a small mark can become a much larger wound than it first appeared. But there is another creature that is even stranger, one whose venom causes very little damage to the skin itself, because its real target isn't your flesh, it's your nervous system, the black widow spider. At first, the bite may seem surprisingly harmless. In many cases, it looks like nothing more than two tiny puncture marks. Some people barely notice it, but beneath the surface, a powerful neurotoxin is already beginning to spread. The black widow's venom contains a compound called alpha-latrotoxin, one of the most potent neurotoxins found in spiders. Instead of damaging tissue, it interferes with communication between nerves and muscles. The result can be both painful and frightening. Within hours, victims may develop severe muscle cramps, abdominal pain, sweating, and intense muscle tightness. Some people describe the sensation as if their entire body is locking up from the inside. Although deaths are rare today, the venom of the black widow spider is powerful enough to cause severe symptoms throughout the body, especially in young children, older adults, and vulnerable individuals. Its danger does not lie in the wound it leaves behind, but in the chaos it can trigger within the nervous system. And yet, in many parts of the world, there is another venomous creature capable of producing an even more dramatic attack on the nervous system, the scorpion. For millions of years, these predators have perfected one of nature's most effective weapons, a stinger capable of injecting a cocktail of neurotoxins directly into its prey. The sting usually begins with an intense burning or stabbing sensation, but in some species, especially the more venomous ones, the effects can extend far beyond the sting site. These neurotoxins interfere with normal communication between nerves and muscles, causing symptoms such as tingling, muscle spasms, excessive sweating, and even a rapid heart rate. In severe cases, victims may experience difficulty breathing or involuntary muscle movements. What's truly unsettling is that such a small creature can trigger a reaction that affects the entire body, yet at least a scorpion immediately lets you know it's there. Pain, burning, spasms. But the final attacker on our list uses a completely different strategy. It doesn't want to be noticed. It wants to remain hidden for as long as possible. We're talking about the tick. Unlike a mosquito or a wasp, a tick doesn't feed for just a few seconds. It can remain attached to your skin for several days while slowly feeding on your blood. It accomplishes this with an extraordinarily sophisticated saliva. Its saliva contains anesthetic compounds that reduce pain, anticoagulants that keep the blood flowing, and even substances that suppress parts of the immune response. As if that weren't enough, the tick also produces a type of biological cement that anchors it firmly to the skin, preventing it from being easily dislodged while feeding. The real danger isn't always the bite itself, it's what the tick may transmit. While attached, some species can spread bacteria, viruses, or parasites responsible for potentially serious diseases, including Lyme disease. Bacterial infection primarily caused by the bacterium Borrelia burgdorferi, which is transmitted to humans through the bite of certain infected ticks. Early symptoms may include fever, fatigue, headache, and a characteristic bullseye rash around the bite. If left untreated, the infection can spread to the joints, heart, and nervous system, leading to more serious complications. Fortunately, when diagnosed early, Lyme disease is usually treated successfully with antibiotics. Each of these attacks leaves behind its own unique signature, and learning to recognize those signs can help you identify the culprit even if you never actually saw it. But there is one thing all of these creatures have in common. They don't attack out of malice, bite or sting to feed, defend themselves, or survive. More often than not, we are the ones who unknowingly enter their environment. That's why the best protection is always prevention. Checking your skin after spending time outdoors, keeping your sleeping area clean, and respecting the wildlife around you can make a huge difference. Because in the end, understanding how these tiny creatures attack isn't just fascinating. It could help you recognize a dangerous bite before it becomes a serious medical emergency. The next time you notice an unusual mark on your skin, don't ignore it. Your body may already be telling you exactly what happened. You just have to know how to read the signs.